Hello everyone! So for my first piece of a series about teaching pencil portraiture, boy that's a mouthful, I thought that I would go ahead and go over the tools that I use. So that way you can become more familiar with what you're going to need to do some of the tricks and things that I do. And also just some terminology of the standards of what's out there. So obviously, one of the first things that you are going to need in any portrait is something to draw it with. So these are my drawing pencils. This is a Staedtler Mars series, and this series contains 19 individual shades. Now, I call them shades, but really what they are is they go by hardness. So I'm going to do a more in-depth video about pencils as exclusive content on my Patreon feed. So that way the people contributing to my Patreon will learn a few things extra about pencils. But just know that one of the basics you're going to need is a set of pencils. I tend to prefer more variation than less because pencil sets range anywhere from 6 to 20 shades. So I prefer a lot of variation as I tend to get very specific as I draw. Another thing you're going to need is one of these. Now this is an art bin tote. I picked this up at my college bookstore as I was taking drawing classes. However, you can also find these at your local Michael's or other various places. I also highly recommend a tackle box. If you are an artist who dabbles in a lot of things or you carry a lot of equipment with you, a tackle box is a great way to pack in a ton of stuff into a whole bunch of different compartments. And usually with a good tackle box, I believe Plano makes one that's really great. You can find trays that allow you to adjust the size of each compartment to your liking. So for a person who has really long colored pencils, but also really small erasers, that's a great thing, being able to be versatile. So this one I use exclusively for charcoal and pencil drawing. And we're going to crack this open. I'll give you a better view of it. There we go. I'm sorry, I'm not a master with a camera here, so this is kind of ad hoc. But there we go. That's my basic setup. And I'm going to go through each compartment here and show you more in depth about what I have in here. So, and I'll put each one up to the camera so that way you can see. So first off, along with pencils, I also happen to have a few of these. I'll pull these out. Some of these are just extra sketching pencils that I have in my hands here. Others have a different purpose. Come on, get out of there. There we go. So some of these are charcoal pencils. And I'm going to hold each one up here. These, several here, are Derwent. Okay. A few others I have are Artist Loft, which you can barely see the name on there. That one's been chewed off by a sharpener. This is one of my better ones to use. And these are all just the same, Derwent and Artist Loft. Now you'll see a soft and a dark on these two. The reason for that is charcoal comes in varying hardness and shades. What I use charcoal for, especially charcoal pencils in my pencil portraiture, is my deepest, darkest areas of shadow. So that's going to be areas like, let's see, around the rim of my glasses, or in some of the darker shadows of my hair, or even the shadows in the corners of my mouth if they get dark enough. So these tend to come in handy. Another thing that comes in handy, but I don't happen to have any more of right now, is a 9B pencil. It is the darkest graphite you can get, and it is glorious for doing deep shadows. Another thing I tend to keep handy, chalk. I've only used it rarely, but a good stick of old whiteboard chalk can do some interesting highlights. Moving on in the same tray, of course, every artist needs, especially if you're a pencil artist, a good pencil sharpener. This one is a basic one, but what I recommend is either get one that you can get a lot of for cheap, or get one that has interchangeable blades. You see these two screws right here? These screws allow me to change out the blades. Now, obviously, I rarely use the fat end of this sharpener. I don't have those monstrous sized pencils. I believe my charcoal pencils sharpen in them, but I use sandpaper to sharpen my charcoal pencils, so I don't ever really use this. Basically, what that means is when this sharpener on the skinny side gets dull, I'm going to switch the blades on here so that way I have another sharp blade. It's always a good backup. This sharpener specifically came with a sketching set from Artist Loft, which is a Michaels brand. And it just came in a pack with some pencils, a kneaded eraser, basic stuff that an artist would need in a lot. I think it was only like $5 on sale too, so it's a pretty good price. And moving on in said same tray, here's a fun little thing. These, every girl knows, are makeup sponges. I steal these from my wife. However, you can find them at any pharmacy in town in the cosmetics section. And makeup sponges are, in art, used as a blending tool. They work awesome with charcoal and graphite. They're a great utensil to have, and they can really, really bring out some blending areas that you have in your pictures. Couple of other not so often used tools here. This piece of cloth that you see graphite all over. This is a chamois. It feels like leather on the back, although I wouldn't say it is, mainly because of the fact that this came with a cheaper set. So I don't necessarily think this is leather. It might be something synthetic. Could be pleather for all I know. But I do know one thing, the softer side of it works great with blending, and it also works great for heavy graphite applications. I'll get into more of that on a later video. And then, of course, another tool that an artist tends to find useful, a razor blade. If you wind up having to trim down papers or trim down drawings, projects for archive purposes, you never know when these come in handy. I've also used them to sharpen a pencil when I couldn't find my pencil sharpener, so be careful with that. That's a very dangerous thing to do. And now we move on to an eraser. I have about a dozen in here, but this one is a Staedtler Mars eraser. I tend to like Staedtler Mars because they come very clean. So as you can see, I haven't cleaned this since my last drawing, but simply taking this eraser and just rubbing it against a piece of cloth or your pants, as I am doing now. All artists have dirty clothing. It's terrible. We look like hobos. You can see that what once was a dirty edge of an eraser has begun to come clean. Staedtler Mars erasers come clean very well, and they also tend to do a really good job of picking up graphite off the paper. So when you're working on something large like a background or a very large area of a portrait, these tend to come in really handy. And then moving on, here we have a few examples of some of my charcoal. I rarely use charcoal in a pencil portrait unless I absolutely need it. And this set explicitly is one that I've been kind of itching to use recently. This is a Conte crayon set. This is a sepia tone set as well, which I have very much been wanting to use. And also I have some gray charcoal here as well. The Conte crayons are interesting, but difficult to use for me. I haven't had a lot of experience with them yet, but that might be something I play with down the road a little bit more. I've always wanted to do a portrait in like a sepia picture tone, kind of like one of those old world rustic photos. Moving on again more, charcoal. just some straight black. It looks like I have a gray in there as well. This is just bulk stuff that you can get at any art supply store. And then I have 3 shades here. I have a dark gray, light gray, and white. Charcoal comes in a lot of variations, and you would not believe how fast it can be burned through. Let's see here. These. This is a fantastic tool. You remember this from grade school? This is a pencil top eraser. Pencil top erasers, when they first come out of the box, have a really awesome sharp point to them. So I've actually found that using those sharp points comes in incredibly handy when you're trying to work on really, really tiny details. And moving on further. Q-tips. Q-tips, they work fantastic for blending as well. Depending on the application, I've used these for obviously charcoal, but Q-tips can come in handy for a lot of detail work because you can pick the fluff off of the ends and you can make a finer tip. So if you're working on something really intricate, like say the iris or the center of an eye, or even just small pieces of an ear, that can come in really handy. All right, the next subject at hand. Now this is another big one, so I'll hold up a few. Here we have blending tools. These, in this hand here, these are known as blender stumps. Blender stumps are rolled and compressed paper that have been shaved down to a point. They come in varying diameters. That one's a big one. This one is the one I use the most often. It's about the same diameter as a pencil. And then over here, I am holding what is known as tortillons. Tortillons are pretty much blender pencils in my book. I have no idea what the practical difference of these is. Obviously, you can see the color on the one right there. I've used some of these for pastels. So, but either way, I've pretty much found them to have the exact same application. I've rarely ever noticed a difference between them. I tend to like the blender stumps a little bit more because they last a little bit longer. Tortillons tend to start breaking down at the tip. So I've noticed that the blender stumps tend to have a little bit more durability to them since they're compressed paper or rolled. I don't know how exactly these are made. They look compressed, but they could be rolled. But one thing about blender stumps is don't ever try and sharpen them. I did that once and it fell apart. I don't know why I thought I could sharpen it like a pencil. I was an amateur at the time. It just didn't work for me. But blender stumps can be cleaned as well, just like an eraser. They can be rubbed off on a piece of paper and they can be brought back to a little bit cleaner of a finish. And tortillons, I would imagine the same. I've never actually tried it. But I keep both handy. You never know what you feel like using. And then that brings us over to my next compartment, which is some more erasers. Now this is a dark eraser, dark rubber. This is going to have a lot more useful application when it comes to charcoal. White erasers, when you're working with charcoal, tend to get destroyed in a matter of like 15 minutes. So I have found that a dark eraser holds up a little bit more to picking up dark charcoal and also continuing to work and not just be rubbing dark charcoal all over the place. And then this little ball of tacky stuff is known as a kneaded eraser. This is one of my more worked in erasers, so it obviously doesn't stretch like taffy anymore. But then again, I might just have to work it a little bit to get it back into condition. Kneaded erasers are a fantastic little tool. If you have an area that you want to, say, pull just a little bit of shade out of, the kneaded eraser can pick up areas of graphite. And let's say you have an area where you have some super fine detail, like, say, the arcs of my eyelids. that would be an area where I would squeeze my kneaded eraser down to a fine little tip like that, and I would use it to pick up graphite in those areas. The beauty of a kneaded eraser is it's a tool that you can transform into whatever size you need for the application you're looking for. And by simply doing what I'm doing right now, which is stretching it and compressing it, stretching it and compressing it, you can actually pretty much clean the kneaded eraser. It's bizarre how these work. I don't understand where the graphite or charcoal goes. And other than that, this right here is a sanding block. Now this is a fresh sheet, but what you can use a sanding block for is to sharpen pencils, sharpen charcoals. Also, I use it to actually make graphite. So if I want to sit there and do a application of just raw graphite on the page, say with my Camoise, what I would do is I would take one of my drawing pencils or perhaps a charcoal pencil, and I would just grind away until I got a nice little pile of graphite or charcoal, which you can also buy separately. It's kind of a waste to burn through your pencils like that, but that's just the habit I've developed while drawing. But just simply sanding away at a pencil can get you a nice little pile of graphite to work with, and you can use that for any sort of application depending on the shade that you're using. Other than that, of course, this lovely thing right here, which is obviously nothing more than a sheet of paper with a hole in it. This is known as a viewfinder. Ancient artists during olden days used to use these to hold up to a subject, and what they would do is they would hold it up, like let's say we wanted to draw the corner of that bookshelf. They would hold it up. Sometimes they would clip it to the side of their easels that they would paint on. And they would use this to create a scaled down version of their canvas size, which was the hole in the window. And they would use that as a reference. So this way they would know, okay, the corner of that bookshelf starts in the upper left-hand corner of my painting. So they would use that to help them create their base sketches before they began to resolve their work. That's pretty much my entire kit. I have a few more tools and tricks that I'm going to hold back on in this basic video. If you want to know more, please visit my Patreon page, which I will post in a link below, and you can help me to continue to create amazing artwork. And together, I will take you through a journey of education and learning. That sounds ridiculous, so let's just say I'll teach you how to make a great portrait. Thanks, and I hope to see you soon.